have Seth Weathers, who is the former director of the Trump campaign in Georgia. He joins us now from Atlanta. And we also have Kevin Chavous, who's the former president of the D.C. Young Democrats. He's live for us here in Washington. Thank you both for being with us. Seth, I want to kick it off with you. So Tuesday's vote on the constitutionality of this trial indicated to us that there were going to be enough Republicans where the president is most likely going to be acquitted. Do you think after the prosecution has finished now, any minds will be changed?
No, I really don't believe so. I mean, the reality is that, they showed a lot of drama and a lot of emotional things today, but doing so does not convict President Trump for being involved or complicit in it. And so, I know a lot of people, again, are caught up in the emotions. There was a lot of emotion, a lot of the videos played, and a lot of scary situations. But again, that doesn't convict former President Trump of inciting or doing any of those things. And it's an attempt by the Democrats to get emotions high and to further tear apart the country.
And I'll put that to Kevin, which is, do you think that the prosecution has successfully connected the dots here, or is this at best circumstantial?
Well, I think they've done as good of a job as they could do. I think they've laid out a very compelling case. But the fact is, these impeachment trials almost always have come down to partisan lines. I mean, you need too many Republicans to cross over in order to convict him. And it just seems very unlikely. They had senators who weren't even paying attention and reading newspapers or reading the news on their phones, not even really keyed into the arguments. So I support the impeachment. I think it needs to be done given the terrible acts of January 6th and the fact that it was the culmination of a lot of similar efforts. They showed video from where in Texas, a Biden-Harris tour bus was surrounded on the highway and people were threatened. And the videos of Donald Trump's own vice president, who they were threatening to kill him, shouting he should be hanged, from a gallows outside the Capitol. He was holed up in the Capitol, unsure what's going to happen. I think they did a good job of making the case, and it's important for future generations to see that this happened. And it'd be nice for him to be impeached, but it's very unlikely because there's no real incentive for Republicans or for most of them to break ranks here.
Everything he's saying is pointing out the bad things that took place on January 6th by everyone other than Donald Trump. And again, we all condemn what took place on the 6th, but it goes back to the reality is that former President Trump had nothing to do with that. And the only thing he said, referring to them going to the Capitol, was to protest patriotically and peacefully. So I think it's pretty clear he didn't want violence. And again, that's why they have no argument. And it is nothing more than political theater at this point.
Kevin, to Seth's point, the FBI had an internal report showing that some of the president's supporters were going to plan this. So how much of the responsibility lies with the president when you talk about the specific threat to lawmakers? Where in the president's speech did he say to go attack Mike Pence and to go threaten Nancy Pelosi?
In his speech, he didn't lay out exactly the people that needed to be attacked, but he said, that you need to fight. He implored people to go fight. And you can't let them take it from you. You have to march to the Capitol and fight. So again, this is a political trial. It's not a court of law. So because of that, there's a very, very small chance he will be convicted. But it is clear that his supporters, act on his words. We saw that in Michigan. We saw that again in Texas. And we saw it at this riot. And it wasn't just him. It was also his subordinates or people that worked for him, like Rudy Giuliani, who said he needed a trial by combat, and also implored people to fight. If you look at his tweets and look at the tweets of his children, it is clear that they were not really doing all they could to stop people from being violent. Once the violence broke out, once the riot started, they were watching it on TV and celebrating. So, in the court of public opinion, most people in America agree that President Trump was wrong. But again, the impeachment trial is political theater, unfortunately, so he probably will avoid being convicted. But I think it's clear that there needs to be some action taken to show we won't accept this type of behavior from someone who's supposed to be the commander in chief and supposed to be the main leader in the country, the president, the executive.
Quick question to both of you before we go. First one is to Seth. Trump's defense team didn't really have great reviews the first time around. What do you think that they'll have to drive home on Friday in their closing arguments here?
Well, first I want to point out, actually, Kevin made me think about something, and I do want to rethink my position on people using the term, we got to fight back, because if you go search President Biden's Twitter account, you'll see that there's tens of times where he has said that supporters need to get out and fight the administration, fight Donald Trump. So maybe he should start the impeachment of Joe Biden due to the incitement of violence. Obviously, I'm being sarcastic, because everything you're hearing from the Democrats about people using a common phrase like, we're going to fight this, fight the man, whatever, it's BS. They don't even believe their own BS, but there's great spreaders of it, which is exactly what's happening there. Ezra, I was not thrilled with the impeachment of the president's or former President Trump's attorneys, or at least some of them, with the presentation. But I think that they do need to hammer it home that A, is you can't remove someone from office that's already not in office, and B, that there is nowhere in any video or statement from President Trump in any way that would have encouraged the violence that took place that day.
Kevin, last one to you really quick. If Trump is acquitted, which we expect that he will be, Senator Schumer has indicated that there could be a push to invoke the 14th Amendment, which gives Congress the power to bar public officials from holding office if they're engaged in rebellion or insurrection. What's the likelihood there?
Well, it remains to be seen. I do think he will take that course of action, and he should. If nothing else, that would be the entire point of this trial, that if he were convicted, he would not be allowed to hold public office again. And that would be the goal, and something that I support. I thought his behavior on the day, especially once it started, was awful. And normally if the Capitol were under siege, which obviously hasn't happened in almost two centuries, it's the first time ever it's been occupied by domestic terrorists or domestic rioters. It's unacceptable. And if it were under another administration, some of the president's strongest defenders would be asking for people to be arrested, or even worse, probably. We know certain people wouldn't even been able to get up the first level of steps at the Capitol if they tried to storm the steps. So I think that the goal, to your question about what Chuck Schumer will do, I think they will try to invoke the 14th Amendment. And I think there may be a little more support from that. We know that Mitch McConnell is already kind of distancing himself from Donald Trump. He's not his biggest fan and wants the party to move on. So maybe that's something that will have a greater success, invoking the 14th Amendment. But that remains to be seen. I do think it's a course of action that is being strongly considered and likely will be pursued.
All right, Seth Weathers and Kevin Chavous, appreciate you both for being with us. Thank you to